All right, welcome back to the Joy Hour podcast. I am just extremely excited today to have in the studio Cortney Chavis. And Courtney has joined this podcast to share her story. I know that she is attending an awesome college, Urshan College. She's studying to receive her bachelor's in Christian ministry. She is a pastor's kid. She has a love for singing and worship leading in church, mentoring others, and most importantly, being open and bold with sharing her story. And I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today, Courtney. I know that we're going to have some fun here, learning, and also some time being vulnerable and being open. And I think it's such an important time in our world to be open and to be real. And I thank you sincerely for taking the time to be on today. And I know that it'll reach people and encourage them to also be open in their journey of life. And that's what we're doing. We're journeying through life and we are encouraging others. And I know we also, right, receiving encouragement from others. And so I just going to open it up to you, Courtney, to just start wherever you'd like and learn about you today.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's amazing. I love sharing my testimony. So anytime I get a chance to share it, will jump at the opportunity. So I'm very thankful. I appreciate y'all and I appreciate this podcast, all that y'all are doing. It's amazing. As we kind of said already in the introduction, I go to Urshan College. I'm a pastor's kid. I've been a pastor's kid for about 12 years now. It'll be 12 years in September. Um, I was raised in the church. I have a really amazing family. My grandfather pastors. I attended his church whenever I was born and up until we moved to Georgia, where we have our church now. And my dad was an evangelist for about 6 years before we started pastoring. So I have been in church. I've been to enough church, to save a few people. So I have been in church pretty much my whole life. I've never really been out of church. But around the time I was 12, I started dealing with some mental illness, depression, and anxiety. I was, just found myself, being super anxious about things that, a normal 12-year-old probably wouldn't be anxious about, and just kind of feeling sad for unknown reasons. And I was really hard on myself because I had such a good life. I have great parents, I have great siblings, I have amazing friends, and just almost kind of felt like a hypocrite for feeling the way that I did in the situation that I was in. I didn't really feel like there was a reason for me to feel that way, so just very confusing. But I dealt with this for many years. I dealt with it. Sometimes I would have, periods or months where it would be better, it'd be lighter, but it was always just there. And then I would have other months and even years that it would be extremely heavy and every day would be a battle. And when I was 17, I started feeling the call to go to Urshan. And I'd never wanted to go to Urshan before. I'd never wanted to go to Bible college. I would always say, I won't be that pastor's kid that just goes to Bible college. I'm not doing it. Didn't want to, didn't really feel called to. So I just said I never would. And I started having this dream every night for about 2 weeks that I was living at Urshan, which was funny because I had never even seen Urshan. But I would have this dream that I would just be living at Urshan and I would be in my dorm room, I would go to classes, and I was really confused because I never thought about it. So I didn't know why it was necessarily in my mind. And I started having it every night. And so I knew that that was God, putting that in my spirit. And I was like, you know what, God, you can give me this dream for the rest of my life. I'm not going to Bible college. I'm not doing it. I've already said, I've said for years, I'm not going to Bible college. I'm not doing it. And I just continued to have this dream, continue to kind of feel this pull. I started kind of like looking at their website, seeing what they had to offer, but I knew I wasn't going to go. I'm not going to do it. And I remember there was one night I was talking with my parents and I was having a really hard conversation with them. And right in the middle of it, my father, who's also my pastor, said, Courtney, I know God's calling you to go to Urshan. And I got real quiet because I knew he was calling me, but I didn't want to go, so I didn't want to hear it from anybody else. And he said, I know that he's been dealing with you about it in these last few weeks, but he's been dealing with me about it for about a year. And I just started crying and sobbing in the backseat of the car, and I was like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to Urshan. And my dad was like, I know you don't. I know you've never wanted to go, but you know, God's calling you and you have to answer that call. And so I agreed to go to a preview weekend. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go, but I'm not going to Urshan. I'm just going because maybe God will stop giving me this dream if I'll just go. And so I went to a preview weekend and I ended up falling in love with it. I met so many amazing people. All the classes that I went to during that preview weekend were just so like amazing, taught me so much, even in those like 2 days that I was there. And it was just amazing. And I felt a lot of peace, but I still didn't want to go. And so I battled for so long just with this idea of going. And I was like, okay, I am going to submit my application. And if I get accepted, I'll go. But I'm praying that I don't get accepted because I'm going to take that as like God was just like joking and he didn't actually want me to go. So I submitted my application and I was accepted within, I think it was 26 minutes. I was accepted.
Oh,
It was insane. I literally sent my application and was almost immediately accepted. And I was actually in a church, or it was a concert actually. My dad was doing a concert at that time, and we were there at a church, and I broke down in tears because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Urshan. Like, I guess I'm going to Urshan. So I ran, I told my parents, they're super happy for me. Super cool, super, God orchestrated all of it. So I started attending Urshan in the spring of 22. And my first semester was awful. It was so bad. Not because of anything with Urshan, but just because how I was. I was still struggling mentally, so awful. And I had left everything I had ever known. And I was in this unknown place, feeling down on myself, and I didn't really know anybody. So I started to isolate myself. And all these problems that I had had for so many years just started to pile up and get so much worse. And I became very suicidal. And I was really scared. I was scared of myself because I would get in these headspaces where it was like it just wasn't me. Like I knew it wasn't me. And I would make these decisions and I was scared because I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I would isolate myself. I wasn't talking to anybody about it because I didn't want anybody to be worried about me. I didn't want my parents to worry about me being so many hours away. I was just super, super scared, very fearful. And I started um, doing self harm, which was something that I said I would never do. When I was younger, I had heard about people doing self harm, and I was like, oh, I will never do that. Like, I just don't think there's any purpose in doing it. Like, I would just never do that. And I found myself doing it. And again, it was just more fear. It allowed more fear into my life because I couldn't control what I was doing to myself. And so started doing self-harm. And then on March 19th, I believe it was March 19th of 2022, I was in my dorm room and I attempted to take my own life. I had gotten to a really dark place in my mind, and I had just convinced myself that there was no way out. I was going to be like this forever, and I might as well just stop now because there's no point in going forward and trying to fix any of this. I just should just give up. And I remember after my attempt, I was sitting in my room and it was almost like I woke up from this like dream that I was having that was very real. And I woke up and I was sitting there and I was just like, "Oh my gosh, what have I done? I need to get help. Like, what have I done? And I had a friend there who came in my room and she helped me. And I was just sobbing because I was like, I said I would never do these things. I said I would never let it get this far. And here I am. And I let it got this far. And I was super scared and, super ashamed, felt so much condemnation, felt so stupid for, trying to take my own life, just felt so dumb. And that next day, it was late at night, I ended up going to bed. And that next day, I was actually supposed to lead worship at church the next day. And I did. Looking back, I should not have done that. I should have just made a call and said, hey, I can't do this. But I didn't want anyone to know. And so I got up the next morning and I went and I just led worship at church. And sometimes I go back and I watch that service and I am just in like disbelief of like how I did that and how I could even get myself to go up there. And the whole service, I was just sobbing, knowing what I had done the night before. And I felt like such a hypocrite. Like I should not be on this platform leading these people in worship. And I was so ashamed. And I made up my mind in that service, I've got to talk to somebody. I have to reach out. And so right after that service ended, I went and I called my parents and I told them what happened. And they were very surprised to say the least. They knew that I was struggling, but they had no idea it had gotten that far. And they just told me, you're going to be okay. We're going to come to you. Like, don't freak out. Everything's going to be okay. And so they came up to St. Louis to see me. And I was just so broken. I felt I felt like I didn't even know who I was. Like it was like this different person, this different version of me that I didn't know, so foreign. And I had to sit in front of my parents and tell them all the things that I'd been doing and watch them, you know, sit there and have to listen to their daughter tell them these things. They had no idea because I didn't tell them. There was no way for them to know I wasn't there. And that weekend, we had a pulpit conference. Urshan does this pulpit conference, preaching conference, amazing conference. And Scott Graham was preaching the first night. And I went to that service. I just knew the only thing I knew in that time was that I needed to be in the presence of God. I was so far from him in that moment, and I just knew that I needed to be in his presence. So I went to this conference and I sat, and that night, Scott Graham preached, "The accomplishment will be the days." And I have probably listened to that message 15 times since that night. It is such a good message. I encourage you to go listen to it. It's on Urshan's podcast. It is a life-changing message, especially for someone that struggles mentally. And in that message, he talked about the story of Mary giving birth to Jesus. And he talked about how we view this story and it's so beautiful, it's so miraculous, this virgin birth, and we read it in just a few verses and it's so miraculous, but Mary had to experience all 9 months of that pregnancy. There was no point where things just flew by. She was there for every single day of that pregnancy. And she had to face, the dirty looks from people that didn't believe her whenever she said that, she was pregnant with the Son of God. And she had to hear all the talk throughout, the town saying, all these things that she had did that she knew she didn't do. She had to face all those things and then also just go through all the changes that come with pregnancy. But the Bible says that when her days were accomplished, she gave birth. And he talked about at the end of your life, the accomplishment will be the days that you just kept going. Even whenever you didn't feel like it, you didn't know what was going to happen, you just kept putting one foot in front of the other, and you took it just one day at a time. And I sat there in that service, and it was like it was just me and him in that room, and he was just pointing a finger at me. And it was like he was saying my name during the message. And I just sat there and I was weeping, and I knew it was a word for me. And it completely changed how I was viewing my situation. I had been viewing my situation as, you know, I don't know if I'll be here next month, or I don't know if what's going to happen within the next year. What are people going to think when this finally does get out and people find out? How are people going to view me? When in all reality, I just needed to take it one day at a time and put one foot in front of the other, because in the end, you look back and so much time has passed. You've accomplished so much, but it was just one day at a time. You can't skip ahead. You have to take it one day at a time. And so I decided then that I was going to start making changes. I started going to therapy, which was something that helped me tremendously. And I would go every week and I would just talk. I would tell my therapist everything about me. I would explain to her everything I had been feeling, everything from the time I was a child up until then. And she helped me. Not only did she help me, she just listened to me, which was something that was so nice, just to have someone listen to, all this mess that was, coming out of me. And I started to slowly feel myself getting better. And it wasn't something that happened necessarily miraculously in a day. I do believe that God can heal someone from mental illness in a day. I have no doubt that He can, but that's not my testimony. God didn't heal me in a day. There wasn't a day that I just woke up and I was miraculously, you know, healed. I can't say that after that night I never thought about taking my life again, because it's just simply not true. I still struggled for a very long time, but I started to have hope that I could possibly get out of this. My mindset changed, whereas before I had told myself, you're going to deal with this forever. There will never be a moment in time where you will not deal with this. And I changed it to, one day I will get out of this. One day I will be able to see the other side of this. I can see that light at the end of the tunnel, even though that light feels so far away. If I can take this one day at a time, I know I can reach it. And I started, doing very practical things to help me get through it and help me get day to day and just keep going. And just like I spoke about with that sermon, I looked back and I had come so far. And I didn't even know it. I didn't realize how far I had come. But there had been months that had passed where I had just, put my head down and said, okay, we're focusing on this day to day. We're taking it one day at a time. And before I knew it, I was looking back and saying, man, I've come so far. And I remember there was a day, it was probably about 6 months after my attempt. I was on my way to work and I was just, nothing crazy was happening in my life. It was just, going through the motions. I had just finished my classes, was going to work, and I noticed that I was happy. I felt joy, and I broke down in tears because it had been so long since I had felt genuine happiness and joy without help, without like being in a certain situation or being with my friends and having a good time. It was the first time that I actually felt myself be happy just for the sake of being happy. And I started to weep. And all I could say was, thank you, Jesus, for giving me my joy, like for giving me my happiness. And I remember I called a friend who knew I had been struggling for a long time, and I had been, keeping up with them and um, checking in with them. And I called them and they answered, and I was crying, and they were like, Courtney, what's going on? And I said, I'm happy. And they were like, okay. What, like, why are you crying? And I was like, no, you don't get it. I'm happy. I haven't felt happy in so long, and I genuinely feel happy right now. Like, I have joy in my heart. And they began to weep with me, and I just sat there and cried. And I was so thankful that I could feel this happiness again. And it was something that I thought that I would never be able to experience again. I would never be able to just be happy to be happy. I would always have to have some help or have to be in a fun situation to get that joy. But here I was just sitting in my car on my way to work feeling joy. And in that moment was one of those moments that I looked back and I realized I've come so far. And I took some time to just kind of reflect over the last few months, and I realized that it had been a while since I had had those dark thoughts like I had before. And I didn't even realize it. It wasn't something that I was like trying every single day to make sure that I didn't think about these things. It was just over time it got easier for me to, think about better things, think on greater things. And I made a commitment to God right then before I went to work. And I said, I will never let my testimony go in vain because there is light at the end of the tunnel. Because before I had never thought that there would be light at the end of the tunnel. And if I'm being honest with you, I had never really heard someone tell a testimony like mine of going through something so awful and then coming out on the other side and finding that joy and happiness again. And so I said, God, if you will present opportunities, I will share my testimony because I don't want to let what I went through be in vain. If it can help just one person, I'll share it to everyone I meet so that they can have that same experience. Because I don't want someone to, go through all those things in the dark and, overcome those things and not say anything and just or to go through those things and think, nobody knows how I'm feeling. Nobody understands, what I'm feeling whenever there's so many people around them that feel the same way. Since I've been sharing my testimony, there have been so many people that have come to me and have said, I thought I was the only one that felt this way, especially pastors' kids or preachers' kids that feel like they can't talk about it because they feel like they don't have a reason to feel that way. And I've had people come to me and crying and saying, you don't even realize like how much it helped just to hear that you went through these things. Like, not even that you helped me anyway, but just to hear that you also went through those things made me feel seen. And so I said, you know what, God, I'm going to continue to share this. And, opportunities have come up, opportunities like this, where I've been able to come on podcasts and share my testimony so that people can hear it and people can say, you know what? There are people out there like me. There are people that struggle like I do and that have gotten better and that have healed. And so maybe I can heal too. Maybe I can, come out on the other side one day too. And it may not be something that happens today or tomorrow, but it may be like me where you look back in 6 months and say, wow, this, I've gotten so much better and I've grown so much from this. And that's kind of my testimony. That's it in a nutshell of, God's been very, very good to me. I'm very thankful. And I pray that, you know, someone would hear this and choose to take the steps to get better and choose to talk to people and, start sharing their story with people so that we can all come together and say, hey, we all got our issues, but when it really comes down to it, we're all the same. We all have gone through this and we can make it out.
Courtney, I've got a lot going through my mind. That was amazing and is amazing. The first main thing that I'm just thinking about is how beautiful it is to get that kind of revelation of how important it is to talk about what you went through. And I'm so proud of you. Um,
Thank you.
I personally, I won't go into the depth of my story today. I think you know a little bit about it, but I had a very similar thing where when I came out of my addictions and drug use and everything, I was very ashamed and guilty and all of that for a little while. And then that moment happened where it was kind of that revelation like, hold on. And joy came into my life. I think I was about 3 months sober. And at that same month, that same week almost, there were some confirmations about the importance of talking about it. And I think that's what I heard from you is that the fact that you do talk about it
Hmm.
has maybe not completely healed everything, but it's healed a lot of your ongoing struggles. Whereas if you sweep it under the rug and it just wasn't ever a thing and you never talk about it to anybody and it could sneak back up on you, right? So that
Right.
whole ability to take something that was so embarrassing, and so, shameful. Oh my goodness, you did what to yourself? How could
Hmm.
you? You're a beautiful young lady with the perfect life going to a Bible college. Like, how is that? Maybe some people do look at it that way, and that's up to them. There's a lot of ways you can look at life, and people have their own judgmental views, and that's up to them.
Hmm.
But I would just encourage you to continue to be loud, continue to be bold. As long as there's breath, there's hope. And whenever
Right.
you are in that dark spot, whether it's addiction or suicide or both, a lot of times they go hand in hand. And when I say the word addiction, a lot of times my mind or people's mind might just think alcohol and drugs, but there's so many things that, of course, we can be addicted to, and even be addicted to anxiety, be addicted to depression, be
Hmm.
addicted to fear. And so it just is so encouraging. Would you agree that that's been a lot of your strength is sharing your story now?
Yes, there have been times where I like have been down. Like I've had a rough day because you still have rough days, Even healed people have hard days and it's just a part of the human life. You're gonna have rough days. And there have been times where I've been, down or, you know, feeling some type of way and I'll get a message from someone that's like, "Hey, I just heard about your testimony and I want to say thank you for sharing that because it meant so much to me and it helped me so much." And that one message will change the whole trajectory of my day
Mhm.
because I'm like, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm having a rough day, but my life could be so much worse. And without even trying, I'm helping people.
Mm.
Like, I'm sitting here going through these things, but my testimony is still touching people because I chose to share it. And there's people out there that are being helped even right now because of something that I said because of what God's done in my life. So I would say 100%. Like, and I always get so much joy from sharing my testimony, even though it's something that's, kind of dark. It's not a very pretty story, but knowing that it could help someone helps me in return. Yeah.
It's everybody's story is important, but right now in this day and age, it's up there at the top as far as importance on sharing. And
Right.
I looked up this morning at the calendar and something popped up, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I thought, guess what we're talking about this afternoon on a podcast? I'm so excited about that. But it started actually officially in the United States in 1949.
Hmm.
And, wow, you know, there's always been mental health struggles, but I think so much more because of social media, because of technology, all of those things that are changing our world, where people are growing up with a cell phone in their hands a lot different than it used to be in 1949. But the mental health topic is it's growing daily. There's organizations starting up all over, both faith-based, non-faith-based, but everybody's trying to say, what do we do about this mental health crisis, this loneliness,
Right.
depression, this suicide? What do we do about it? And that's why I think like you said, every opportunity you get, just continue to. I hope you're writing a book or getting started on it. Anything you can use, podcast, books, one-on-one, just continue to share boldly. Um, my personal experience on this, a lady told me, she said, Tom, if you tell somebody about your story every day, you'll never crave alcohol or drugs as long as you live. I'm like, well, let's try it. And so sure enough, I did. That was about 2 years ago. And now I've always sensed that when I tell somebody each day, and usually it's multiple people, I meet a lot of people throughout what we do in construction and everything. But when there's a few days back to back, I haven't met a new person and got that opportunity to talk about what I've been through. It's kind of interesting how it sneaks back up on me a little. Not necessarily like I'm going to run out and drink or drug,
Right.
um, but like depression will sneak in.
Hmm.
Tom, your story's not important. Stop telling everybody. It's just weird. Like self doubt will kick in, and
Right.
almost sort of a feeling of a little bit of guilt will come back in, or shame. Tom, you did all these horrible things, and so I think it's a proactive approach to share for our own sake and our own continued healing. Um, but then, yeah, the amount of people it can reach where they look at you and go, "Wow, that I never would have known." Courtney experienced those things in a Bible college setting. Yeah, why
Hmm.
would she do that? And it normalizes that conversation. Like I think at some point in life we all have mental health, mental illness struggles. There's different levels
Yeah.
of it, but we have a job to do to continue to talk about it. And what are some tools? I'm just thinking through questions. We still have plenty of time here, but
Hmm.
what are some tools you used maybe at the 6-month mark, maybe at the 1 year mark, maybe today? Just a few
Hmm.
things that you would recommend that really helps other than talking about it and living loud.
Yeah. I have a few things that have helped me actually. I have a lot of, um, obviously, I have spiritual things that, we as Christians should do, but I also have a lot of practical things. Um, so spiritually, obviously, continue to stay in the Word. Like, God's Word is so intriguing because it is like it's living and breathing. And so you can read something one day and be like, okay, whatever, and then read it the next day and it can like be illuminated to you and you just like oh my gosh, like God will literally speak. It's literally his word. Like God will speak to you through his word, and it sounds very, like cliche and whatever, but genuinely reading his word will bring you peace, and there's so many answers in his word for things that you may be feeling. And a lot of times when you're feeling a certain type of way, it's hard to want to read, but read read the Bible. There are a lot of amazing things. Make it a habit to in the mornings before you do anything, set aside time to read his word and to pray, because that's how God speaks to you. A lot of times like I've never heard the audible voice of God personally, but I can say for sure that there are times that God spoke to me, and it was through things like His Word and through prayer. Um, Also, along with prayer, a conversation that I've been having here so much, it comes up probably 2 or 3 times a week because of a class that I'm taking, is how we pray. And I'm taking a class called Book of Job right now, and we're talking about the story of Job, which is, the book of suffering. Job went through all these things, he suffered, and, you know, this Book of Job is just a very interesting book. I encourage everyone to go read it. There's a lot of stuff to learn. But one thing that I took away from it through this class that I had never looked at it like before is that the book of Job is truly a book about prayer. And it shows us how we're supposed to pray to God through suffering. And I was having a conversation with my friends because they were talking about, like the right way to pray and how we should approach God in our prayer. And I mentioned to them, I said, I think God truly just wants us to tell him how we feel. And I feel like a lot of times we shy away from telling God how we truly feel, and we will, come to him with our little patty cake prayer, and, we'll just say, God, you're so good, which is things that we need to do. But we will shy away from telling God how we truly feel because we think that he is going to shame us or whatever, when truly he just wants us to speak. If you go and you read the book of Job, Job is like, curse the day that my mother had me. Like, I wish like he says he takes it even further than like I want to die, but he's like, I wish that the day that I was born was removed from the calendar year so that there wasn't even a chance of me being in this. It's like crazy. Like he is like he goes into like so deep into like how he feels, and his friends are like, you can't say that. You can't say that to God. Like you can't pray that way. But at the end of the book, God says that Job did what was right in the eyes of God. And I told them about my testimony. And when I was going through all those things, I did not want to pray because if I'm being honest with myself, I was very angry with God because I was like, why do I feel these things? And I want to be better and I'm trying to get better, but I'm not getting better. And almost like, why are you putting this on me? And, people may say, oh, you can't say that. You can't. No, that's how I felt. Like, that is just the truth. If we're going to be honest, that's the truth. And that's how I felt. And I remember I would sit in my room and I didn't want to pray because I would try to pray and I would become angry. And I would be like, you know what, God? I don't feel like I can tell you that you're good right now because I don't feel like you've been good to me in a long time. And I would sit there and I would say, God, I want to be better and you haven't made me better and I'm angry and I don't understand why you would allow me to go through these things. I'm here at Bible college. I'm studying your word every day. It's literally what I'm going to school for. And I feel this way. I would understand if I was out in the streets and, like doing all this stuff if I felt this way, but I'm not. I'm here, I'm in your will, I'm doing what you want me to do, and I feel this way. So why am I, doing all this stuff? And it felt like a boxing match with God every single time I would pray because I couldn't just sit there and be like, "Oh God, you're so good and you're so holy," which are true things, but in that moment, that's not how I felt. And when I look back now, that is the only thing that kept me in relationship with God. Because if I wasn't going to pray like that, I wasn't praying at all. Because I'm not about to sit there and lie about how I feel. So it was either pray like that or don't pray. And if I would have chosen to just, stay silent and not say anything, would I still have a relationship with God? Because I just decided to push him away. When all reality, that was what kept my relationship. And now, being on the other side of things, I feel like I can tell God anything because I've told him everything. And I feel like we get scared with the way that we approach God because we think that he is gonna, shame us for the way that we speak or shame us for how we feel. But he already knows how you feel. So why would you come before him and lie about how you feel when he knows? No, he wants you to speak to him how you feel. And like we were talking about that in class, and it was just such a revelation to so many people of like, God just truly wants you to speak to him about how you feel. Like, just as you would go and speak to anybody else, go to the one that can actually handle it and actually help you and speak to him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very, practical thing with prayer that may seem very like surface level, but it's something that we struggle with. We struggle with being honest with God. Um,
If I could jump in real quick, I'm sitting over
yeah.
here learning
Yeah.
and agreeing with you. I've been raised in church all my life. I've known of God all my life. I
Hmm.
didn't really know God until a little over a year ago, and I
Yeah.
actually had the best connection with him at the cemetery. And won't go into all of that, but basically, my dad's buried there, and I was having a talk with God, and I've been there probably
Hmm.
200 times. And a lot of those talks, I was drunk and high, and I just voiced everything I felt through all of those years of. He's been gone for about 7 years now, but
Hmm.
I think that's so important is to just continue to talk to him.
Hmm.
Yes, it's good to worship him and praise him, like you said, and he
Right.
is holy, absolutely. But there is that importance of not well, growing up as a kid, I used to think that, oh, you have to pray this certain way. And if you don't pray this certain way, then just don't pray at all. So for
Hmm.
years of my life, I didn't pray at all. I just bottled things up and didn't talk to God at all. And so through the last year and a half or so, I've been doing more of that is just, God, You know what? I am absolutely not doing good right now.
Yeah.
And I'm really struggling with this. And I'll pour my heart out to him. I'll grab the Bible, I'll flip through, and something will open. I'll open somewhere. And he does speak to me almost exactly on that topic every time within just a short amount of time. So it's not like I got to spend hours and hours. It's not
Right.
overwhelming. And I'm glad you're sharing this with the listeners today is don't look at prayer analytically, just talk. Just
Yeah.
tell them, "This is where I'm at. This is what I'm feeling. This is what I think of you," you know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I used to not think some good things about God because I was pretty upset that my dad didn't make it through cancer.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, that communication, I think, factor is so important to keep going and just saying, "God, here's where I'm at today. And by the way, where are you at today? Because I don't hear you, I don't
Yeah.
feel you, and
Yeah.
just whatever you're going through, just talk," almost like a not a disrespectful, "Hey, bro, how are you?" But a serious, "Hey, dad. Hey, you're my father, and I need you,
Right.
and this is what I'm feeling," and get emotional with God, I think is so important.
Right.
Keep
Right.
going.
Well, you even see like the ultimate um person that we're supposed to model ourselves after, Jesus Christ,
Mhm.
in the Garden of Gethsemane,
Right.
but right before he was about to be crucified, even him knowing, like he knew as soon he was born to die, but he being fully man and fully God was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and it says that he wept and cried until he was sweating blood. And he was crying, God, I don't want this. But then he said, not my will, but thine be done. And then on the cross, he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me? And
Mhm.
like, we're like, that's
Yeah.
Jesus. But no, even him, in the fully human part of him, he felt that and was like, God, I don't want this. And he expressed it. It's like, if Jesus will do that, what makes you think that you shouldn't do that?
It's good.
If,
Yeah.
if the ultimate model of what we are supposed to be like, we are supposed to be Christ-like.
Yeah.
If he did it, why do you think that you shouldn't, It's like,
Oh,
no, cry
yeah.
out to God. Tell him how you feel, even if it's hard, and even if you feel like it might not be what he wants to hear, he just wants to hear from you, you
Yeah.
know? So that's definitely the spiritual side of it, but I do have practical because I know that, you know, a lot of it is very practical and we have to put it into everyday application. Um, and so one of the biggest things that helped me was identifying my triggers. So I sat down and I was like, okay, what are things that trigger me or that will make me feel this certain type of way during the day? Because I would have times where I'd be completely fine, and then all of a sudden I would be like, "Oh my gosh, my whole world is ending." And I'd be like, "Okay, what got me there? Like, how did I take this drastic of a turn, you know?" And so identifying triggers. And one thing that I would do a lot is if I would have a hard day, I would always go to my room and I would isolate myself. And I didn't have a roommate at the time. And so it was just not good for me to go to my room because I would sit there and I would talk to myself. And it's never a good idea to just sit and talk to yourself because you don't know anything more than what you know. And I would sit there and then I would end up in these situations and I'd be like, how did I get here? And it was because I was isolating. So there were times where I would make myself, I like remember one specific time that I was just not having a good day. And I left the school and I was walking to my dorm room and I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. And I was like, I can't go to my room right now. Like in this headspace, I cannot go to this room. So I stopped, went back, turned around, went back to the school. And about 30 minutes later, after I had been sitting and talking with people, I felt so much better because I had just decided, I'm I'm going to take control of this and I'm not going to let myself. So, identifying your triggers, talking to people. You suppression is never going to work. It won't work in anything. Talk to people. Go to therapy. I'm a huge advocate for, therapy, and I think that it is very good for you to go and speak to somebody that can speak back to you and that has knowledge about what you're talking about. Go to therapy, go speak, find mentors in your life, people that you trust, pour into them, tell them how you're feeling, be honest with them, be open with them. Um, Something super practical that I used to do is if I was ever in my head, I would listen to worship music. Music is so powerful. Music is one of the
Mm,
only things that is on earth that was not created on earth. Music was not created here, and music is all about worship. That's why it's very important to be careful what you listen to, because no matter what you think, the stuff that you're listening to is affecting you, because it's all worship. There's no way to separate music and worship. Music is worship. And so whenever you get in those moments where you're feeling down, I would just turn on worship music and I would sit and I would just listen to worship music. Sometimes I wouldn't even sing along, but I would just sit and listen to worship music. And then finally, last one, find something to live for.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
this is something that has helped me a lot currently whenever I still struggle. Find something and someone or someone's to live for.
Mhm,
My friends and my family, I have learned to cherish the relationships in my life so much more than what I used to because whenever I was younger and I was fighting those things, I really didn't think a lot about my relationships because in my mind, I really wasn't going to be here long enough to even care.
mhm,
But I realized whenever I started truly valuing my relationships with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends, my whole outlook on life changed because I wanted to be able to be there for them and I wanted to be able to experience things with them. And I found such a love in my heart for the people around me that I couldn't imagine being here with or not being here and them having to experience those things without me. And so cherish the relationships in your life. And whenever you get down, think about those people in your life that you know love you and never convince yourself that they don't love you because it's also very easy to sit and say, you know what, nobody cares. Nobody, truly, no, people do care about you. People care a lot about you. And sometimes it's really sad because we figure that out way too late. You
mhm,
know, me and my friends, we started doing this thing for every single birthday. It's called We Give Each Other Our Flowers because it came from the saying that people receive way more flowers at funerals than they ever did in their lifetime.
yeah.
And so every birthday, we will sit and we will go around the room and we will say one thing that we love about the person's birthday because we never want them to leave this earth without knowing how much they were truly cared for. And so
Mhm,
we give people their flowers. I think it's very important to cherish the relationships in your life and also to reach out to people because there were people that were going through the same things I was during the same time I was, and I didn't even know it. And if I just would have reached out and said, hey, this is how I'm feeling, they could have been like, you know what? I'm feeling this way too. And we
mhm.
could have talked about those things and got through it together. So find something to live for. But those are kind of my practical things that have helped, while I was in it, but also that I still practice every single day.
Well, extremely helpful, and I hope that you continue to just dive into that purpose. And a couple things go through my mind, and I just kind of speak what comes through my mind real quick here. I I hope that you, whether it's just do a lot more of these, like I say, write a book, um, but on a weekly basis, there's other options that you could be doing to really be vocal with people in your community. I think in I'm a long ways away from college age, but I think the shutting off the phones is so important. Even
Hmm.
as you're talking for this 1 hour episode here, I'm sure your phone's probably had some messages. I'm sure mine has too. But we're
Hmm.
giving each other our undivided attention, not just because we're on the podcast, but that's the polite thing to do. But
Right.
I care about your story. I truly today am. I love that you shared your story. I'll never forget your story. Um, I think it's so easy in our day to day life to ask somebody else how they're doing. But if we're preoccupied and we're just kind of saying, "How are you?" that person's going to say, "I'm fine. How are you?" But
Right.
how do you in your college, if you're not already, pull each other aside once a week or periodically throughout the day and look them in the eye and say, "No, sister, brother, friend, I want to know, and I will stay right here in this conversation as long as I need to. How are you doing?"
Right.
Just to draw it out of them. And what I've seen that's drawn good conversations out of people in my community is me sharing my story.
Hmm.
I mean, total strangers I've met, and within 30 seconds, they've heard the darkest of the dark of what I went through. And at first, some look at me like, why in the world is this stranger telling me this stuff? And we'll keep talking. And within 2 to 3 minutes, guess what they're doing? Sharing real talk. And we
Right.
go deep I've got deeper in conversation with some of these people I've met in 5 minutes than people I've known for 5 years.
Right.
So
Right.
we can be surface with each other and how are you doing? I'm fine. Or we can say, hey, May is mental health month, and I'm asking you, how are you doing? Or hey,
Hmm.
it's mental health Monday. Or you can come up with all these different,
Hmm.
tag in Thursday. Or so I hope that you are, if not, maybe this inspires you to think about even on your campus, just
Yeah.
create every chance you can to pause life to ask others, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And what's something good that happened this week and what's something bad that happened this week. And so much of that has changed because everything's moving so fast and we're all very ADHD because the phones and the technology. And hey, I
Yeah.
asked how you doing, but I only have a minute. So just tell me real quick, how are you doing? I'll see you next week. Okay, hope you're doing good.
Hmm.
Slow it down. Slow it down and save a life.
Right.
And if you love people and you have that intention, being intentional, like that purpose factor, it does take time to sit there and listen to some people's stories, and you're like, "Okay,
Right.
this can of worms might go a couple hours." But
Hmm.
if you love them and that's what they sense, that could be the life-changing, thing that happens in their life, and I think that's so much a part of the discovery. I talk a lot about recovery. I'm in recovery. People are like, "Oh, good for you. How long? How sober are you?" "Okay, 28 months." "Great. Okay." Recovery, everybody understands that word. I don't say I don't drink. I say I'm in recovery. But
Hmm.
I more importantly, I'm in discovery of my purpose. And
Hmm.
my purpose is to share my story of what tried to kill me and take my life, what tried to ruin my marriage. And I just encourage you to just find every opportunity you can to do what you're doing right now. It takes a boldness, and I'm glad God's brought you to that point of sharing your story. I hope a lot of people share this episode with others. You never know who it's going to reach. If a listener, viewer of this podcast uh, wants to reach out to you, do you have a way so far that people can look you up or ask you questions? Or we'll do another one of these when you can. But I think there might be some people that go, I got a question, or I'd like to learn
Yeah.
more about that.
Um, a lot of people have reached out through to me through Instagram.
Good.
Social media is, has
Yeah.
its good things, even
Yep.
though, it's whatever. But uh, my Instagram is just Courtney.Chavis, Cortney. I don't have a U in my name, kind of different, um, but also if you reach out through me through my email, which
Mm-hmm.
is CourtneyChavis03@gmail.com. I could also do that through there. But yeah, any social media, Facebook too. If you message me, I'll message you back. If it gets to the point that I feel like, we can exchange numbers maybe and talk or whatever. But those
Yeah.
things I could
That's perfect.
definitely, yeah.
That's perfect. Volunteer and service work is so important. You touched on that, but I know that's been a lot of my strength and other people that I talk to on these topics is, we went through something extreme. We
Hmm.
still go through things every day, but
Right.
we have tools that work. You shared quite a few practical and spiritual tools, and I'm so thankful for that. You said it so clear and easy to understand. It does come down to putting in the work, like you said, one day at a
Right.
time. You can't just go on cruise control and be like, "Oh, I'm so good that I'm going to stop doing all these daily disciplines." And no, it's going to sneak up on you again a month later. "Oh, I relapsed. Oh, I did it. And so I just encourage the listeners to put in that daily work. That morning routine is so important. That turning off a phone and picking up the Bible,
Mm.
picking up a journal, outdoor. right? There's so much to be said for go outside, sit on a bench with a friend or sit on a bench
Hmm.
with a book, but get outside, get away from the screens and recharge. And just a lot of this is on my mind because of you know how the need is so great. But it's
Hmm.
May Mental Health Month. Let's talk a lot about it. And
Right.
so, got a couple more minutes though. Anything you want to share? And I'm sure we'll do another follow up. And really enjoyed doing this with you today.
Yes, I've loved this. Um, I think the only thing I really have left to say is it's up to you. You
Hmm.
have to, just like you said, you have to take it into your hands. If you want change, you have to be the change.
Hmm.
And you are not going to wake up one day and everything is miraculously going to be better. It's just not going to happen. It's not how it works. You do have to put in the work, which is hard sometimes. It's difficult because we are very much, we live in like I like to say we live in a microwave society. We just pop in the microwave and do whatever, but no, there's things that this just take time and they take work. And you have to take it into your own hands and you have to decide, you know what, I want better for myself. And I want better for my family. I want better for the people around me. So you have to make that decision, and you have support. You have people around you that are supporting you, that are cheering you on, that are here for you, you know, reach out, find that support system, but remember that it's up to you. It's ultimately your responsibility, and
Yeah.
you can do it. You have the strength to do it, even if you don't feel like you do. You do. You can do it. So,
Yeah, no, so much can happen in a moment as far as healing. God is the healer.
hmm
By his stripes, we're healed. But I do think he gives us a brain for a reason, and that brain will speak.
right,
Our heart will speak to us and say, "You need to read more books and stop looking at your phone. You need to
right,
go to a meeting. You need to have a counselor." I've put a lot of hours and a lot of gas in my car going to and from meetings and counseling sessions and therapy. And of course,
right,
rehab was expensive and all these things. But you put the work in, it's really worth it. And
right.
you look back and go, I'm a long ways away. Like you said, I'm a long ways away. Have I arrived? No, we never arrive
hmm
until we finally arrive. There's no perfect. And so beautifully said today. Thank you so much for sharing your story,
Thank you.
Courtney. And we'll just close out by telling everybody you can do this. God will help you.
Yes.
You put in the work. You can do this. And I want to encourage you to find the right circle of people that will encourage you in your community. Listen to the right podcast. Listen to the right music. Read the right books. What you put into your eyes and your ears will really drastically change how easy or how hard these struggles are.
Right.
I like what you said on music. That's a big factor.
That's true.
All right. Well, we'll close out here. Thank you all for listening to the Joy Hour podcast. And Courtney, again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode on the Joy Hour podcast. Don't forget to check out some of our other episodes for more powerful discussions. Want to keep up with new episodes? Be sure to subscribe. And as always, we'd appreciate it if you like, share, and comment your favorite part of this episode right down below.